Hello, I'm Gianluca Solera, I'm Italian, and I live in Iskandaria in Egypt. I'm here in Athens to meet with people, movements, and initiatives that have emerged, especially after the Syntagma occupation. Why? Because I'm writing a book on protest movements and uprisings which have occurred in the Mediterranean region in the last 2 years. I've been crossing the whole region in the last months. I've been in, of course, Tunis, Libya, where in Egypt, this is where I lived. I was in Palestine, I was in Turkey at the borders with Syria, in Spain, in Italy, in Germany for the VILL.K march. And now I'm here in Athens. And the objective of my research is to find what these movements in the north and in the south have in common. Whether there is a Mediterranean awakening, whether the people, the communities, the citizens all around this common sea are experiencing a new season of freedom, democracy and civic engagement. I met in these last 2 days a lot of people here in Athens, from the I Won't Pay movements to the multimedia team, from the suicide helpline to community garden initiatives, from artists and poets to new real democracy movement. And I'm trying to find out how people organize themselves in this situation where the country is experiencing a political, economic and social crisis, and how they try to discover a new protagonism of people in taking their own life in their hands. This is what interests me the most. And I think that, well, I've been here for 2 days only, but I can say that there is a special energy in this place, and it is an energy which is not necessarily connected to the contingencies, to the current situation. It goes beyond, and I think it is something related to the need of people to stay together, to rediscover the sense of neighborhood, the sense of community, the sense of mutual support, the sense of taking decisions together. And this is maybe one of the elements I would like to stress in my book, whether it is about demolishing Mubarak's regime or resisting to the despotism, violent despotism of Bashar al-Assad, or resisting to the selling of the Spanish state. It's exactly this, that people realize that they cannot trust anybody else except themselves. And that this is why they have to move into an idea that they are users, into a new idea that they are decision makers. And I believe that what is happening in this region and what has been happening in the last 2 years is something special that might bear fruits and might make people think about the limits of our development model, the limit of our current democracies, and the need to rethink everything together again once a time. Well, I can imagine I've met a lot of people in the last months, and I think there are 2 elements which are interesting to me and I would like to highlight. The first one, I'm saying with respect to those uprisings and those movements which have emerged in our European democracies. The first one is the idea of occupying a public space. Well, everything has started with the occupation of the Kasbah in Tunis, then with Tahrir Square in Cairo, and move into different areas of the cities surrounding the region. But this is a very interesting element, which denotes, in fact, the change of status of those people from private citizens from private individuals or let's say users or consumerists into citizens with a public dimension. The occupation of the public space in this sense is very symbolic. It means we want to move from our private domain into a public domain. We want to get out in the street in order to say what we think and to share what we think with others. And this is something, one of the first elements I would like to highlight with respect to the commonalities between the different movements, the occupation of public spaces. The second element is the effect of contamination, which has two dimensions. The contamination is about the way how things are done. So you occupy a place, you occupy a space, or you organize a march in an Egyptian city, and then you decide to do something similar in a neighboring country, despite the gaps, political gaps, like Israel, Tel Aviv. And this is the contamination. It's in Italian we have a word which is contagio. Contagio is a word which is related to medicine. I mean, it's when a sickness moves from one individual to the other. Well, this is also a kind of sickness because it puts yourself into question and it puts your own system into question. So this is this contagio effect which has moved beyond the disease from one country to the other. The other element of contamination is let's say the cultural contamination. Who has ever imagined only a couple of years ago that a revolutionary movement would have been born into a Muslim despotic country? Nobody. Nobody would have imagined that. So it's a Muslim country, Muslim nations that are teaching us how to make a revolution, how to raise up. And that, of course, puts into discussion many things. How we see the Arabs, how we look at religious identities, how we look at ourselves. And the fact that Europe and the Arab world share a phenomenon like migration, which has been an important phenomenon of mobility of people from different cultures in the last 30, 40 years, is something very important that is going to play a role in this period after these uprisings. And it will be a vector of communication and transfer and exchange of experience and practices. Yesterday, for example, I was with some of the colleagues of the multimedia team, and one of the things were discussed was how is it possible that a veiled woman can make a revolution? And I said, yes, a veiled woman can make a revolution. Not only can, veiled women have made the revolutions in Egypt. And this was something difficult to accept because it was not belonging to the traditional paradigm, how we associate what we identify with Islam with respect to our categories of civic engagement and citizenship. And therefore, this is why I think that another element which is very important that these uprisings have in common is the contamination and the consequences this contamination will bring about in our societies. We have been reading in media that what has happened in the Arab world was a kind of revolution or uprising for political reasons, whereas the Occupy movements in Europe were for social economic reasons. Well, I would like to say that this is a false image because I believe that there is no difference between a social economic crisis and a political crisis. The crisis is about the system of governance of our societies, of our communities, which has a social, economic dimension and a political dimension. I remember that one of the most famous slogans that were used in the both Tunisian and Egyptian revolution was عيش حرية عدالة اجتماعية, meaning bread, freedom and social justice. So it was not about democratic elections. It was not about modern constitutions. It was about access to rights. And the same, of course, is happening with respect to the Occupy movements, questioning the idea of the resource sharing and questioning the idea of the decision-making process and the control of the decision-making process with respect to the resource sharing. What leads to me to the idea that we are living in a moment which is a moment, which is the moment. This is maybe the moment where the new generations from the Arab world and from Europe can join together and find a common reason for fighting for a common future. I do believe that we have to make all possible efforts to strengthen these relations and to create new alliances between the civil society, the engaged and committed civil society in both parts of the Mediterranean, in order to tackle issues which are common, which have political or socio-economic or even environmental nature. And we have, I think, to do it with or without our institutions, with or without our governments. The autonomy or the capacity of action and protagonism and leadership that the society, the organized society, can produce in this period simultaneously both in the north and in the south of our Mediterranean region is unique. It is maybe the first time that has happened, and this is why I believe the movements from both sides must think and act together strategically.